of the leadership of the AIE network, bringing you the AIEforum. I want to thank everyone who has made it possible, and everyone who has joined us online and on-site as well. Just about 3 months ago, we brought you the first AIEforum, and we looked at accelerating the African Continental Free Trade Area through capacity development. We're looking at how best capacity development will help us in achieving or in supplementation of AFTA. And we are bringing you the second quarter edition. We are looking at promoting cultural cohesion and peace to facilitate intra-African trade. So every one of us know that Africa from January 2020, we decided to trade among ourselves as a continent. And we are doing that through the African Continental Free Trade Area. So today we want to understand how cultural cohesion and peace security will play a role or a key role in implementation. Don't forget that you can join the conversation also through our social media platforms. If you visit our LinkedIn page, you'll find us there on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram as well. You'll find the AIE Forum live as well. So without wasting much time, I would hand over to you, Irene, to officially introduce our moderators, and right after, we'll set the discussions rolling. Thank you.
And so joining us virtually is Dr. Sharif Alabi, the HD Africa Governance, Development and Partnership National Nation Building Initiative. We also have Dr. Violet Makuku, who I'm proud to say I work with at the Association of African University, a quality assurance specialist. We also have Mr. Victor K. Broby, as my colleague already said, a finance lawyer who is the head of Department of Law, Lancaster University, Ghana. And we also have online, also joining us virtually is Prof. Gregory Yosen, President and CEO at Graham K. International. And so these are our finest panelists. I think they are here because we know what they are worth and what they bring to our discussion. And so, Kwesi, maybe we can start probably with those online with you so that we also can handle those with us here physically present. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are privileged to bring on board our panelists, but want to hear their first statement. And so, Dr. Sharif Alabi, if you can hear me, kindly unmute and give us your welcome message. Just within 1 minute, what should participants expect?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a privilege. Today, I'm pleased to be part of this conversation, largely one because I am an African, and proudly so. Though I'm based in the UK, have lived a significant part of my life here, studying and working and lecturing and doing all sorts of other things in the past. But also continuing my engagement on the continent through the African Development Bank and some other projects that I coordinate and run on the continent as well. My particular interest in this conversation is really to try and find where, among several other policies we tend to create on the continent, one of the disappointing elements of those conversations has been the way forward in translating policy into action and seeing it really happening, and what else can be done where it is not going the way it's meant to go, and whether there is particular things we need to do by way of non-compliance, in particular, and sanctions against non-compliance, and enforcement in some of the policy areas we have on the continent. So as far as the intra-African trade agreement is concerned, it's a matter of culture, but I believe the culture can be defined in many ways as applied or applicable in this instance, more so in terms of our own business practices on the continent. And yes, I would like to see the conversation extend to those areas as we go along this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharif Alabi. We want to bring in Professor Gregory Yosen. Prof, what is your opening statement?
Thank you very much, my esteemed members of the AIE and all the people who are on this platform right now. I thank everybody who is listening in, both here in Ghana, in Africa, and in the diaspora, wherever we may be. I'm here today to bring a little bit of my suggestions or my view of what the culture, African culture, means in the implementation of whatever policies and practices that we're putting together for the African continental free trade area. I believe that the issue of culture should be looked at from the perspective of historical experiences that the African people, the African nations, and the African continent has experienced over the years and decades. And so I will touch on that briefly on that. And then secondly, I would also like to look at the role that culture will play in the success of this African free trade agreement that we are embarking upon now. Without our culture, without our history, we'll be repeating the same mistakes over and over and over and over. So we got to revisit our history, learn the lessons that we should have learned earlier on in order to move forward in unity, in peace, strategize, and move forward as a people. And that's what I'm going to talk about. As an educator, I'm not a historian, but I think that way back in 1990, I was first asked by some universities in the US to be what's called visiting professor, Martin Luther King visiting professor. And one of the things that I did was to at least educate the people in Detroit, the Michigan area, about the relationship between the African and African American experiences in terms of culture and how we can move forward as a people. God bless you. I look forward to expatiating on some of the things that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Great. I'm already excited. Thank you so much for bringing in that rich perspective. Irene, these are my two distinguished panelists from online. I would hand over to you so that you take us through the on-site panelists as well.
Yes, so as they already say, ladies first. And so Dr. Makuku, I'll let you go first. We will take your remarks in 1 minute about the whole program and what we seek to discuss and achieve.
In short, I just want to underscore two words, just two words to begin with: tolerance and accommodation. I realize that we have this central aspect which we want to look at, the African Continental Free Trade Area. But I just want to tell you that on ethnic grounds, on religious grounds, on political grounds, and you may laugh at this, but on which team, football team you support, is it Man U or Manchester United and what, all those things can be small things to affect us, but tolerance and accommodation will take us there. And then we need intra-Africa cooperation. That's very, very key. But when we say intra-Africa cooperation and looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area, we are also saying, how can we have some integrated zones, which if we decide that Ghana will be integrated in terms of being a processing zone for our tropical fruits and what have you, but we need people from other countries to come and work as they work together as a team. I presume they get to understand each other, and then that will propagate and go on like that. But we can go further. It's not always business. Why wouldn't we also have our own games, game leagues for traditional games, where we can actually have national leagues for whatever games we normally play, our own African and truly original games which our elders and forefathers used to play. Can't we take them to the level of football? Right. You know many of them, and then we integrate. As we do that, we continue to create fertile ground for understanding each other's culture and so on. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Tolerance and cooperation. And so, Mr. Brobe, just your opening remarks for this program.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. Firstly, let me just say what a pleasure it is to be here and to take part in this program. We're honored to be the host here at Lancaster University in Ghana. We hope that this is not the last such event which occurs here, because this is a matter of not just great interest to me personally, but of interest to our student body as well, because we have a somewhat Pan-African, sort of West African-wide student body. And essentially, initiatives such as this, initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and other similar arrangements, and how they can work not just from the economic and the trade perspective, but from a cultural perspective as well, is something that is of interest to us and is really vital to the success of any such arrangement. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you here in the studio and with the viewers out there what our thoughts and ideas are.
Recording in progress.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Kwesi, these are remarks from the studios of Lancaster University's our proud partners for this AIEforum, the second quarter edition. And so, Kwesi, I think we can start, we can roll with the main discussion. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Irene, for linking us up with our on-site facilitators or panelists. If you just joined us, you are watching the AIEforum brought to you by the AIE Network and being sponsored or partnered by the Lancaster University and other distinguished partners that we'll be introducing as the show goes on. So I would want to bring in Professor Gregory for a start. When we began the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we were very cognizant of the fact that culture plays a key role in establishment or in the implementation of the free trade area. But want to understand from you very well, how do you think culture and or cultural cohesion and then also peace and security of our continent play a key role in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I initially said that I would like to touch on the historical aspects and then go to the cultural aspects, as well as some of the contributions Africans have made to world civilization. It is very, very important that everybody knows where they come from. It's very, very important for everyone to know their background. Very, very important for people to know the language or languages that are spoken around them. And it is very, very important for us to, at least for the sake of unity, harmony, cooperation, and progress, to map out certain areas of our culture that are very, very beneficial for the improvement of our societies, for the continuity of the developmental achievements that we've had before, and for the sustainability of the resources and the things that we cherish. Culture does not necessarily and only mean having a Kwesidai or some kind of festival where we go and dance and show our adua. That is one aspect.
Right.
But when people don't know their history, when people don't know their backgrounds, they easily get lost. And the reason why I'm saying this is that when I first went to the US in 1976, came back, went again in 1990 as a visiting professor, stayed there for about 40 years. One of the principal things that I met African Americans in the diaspora, at least in the US, complaining about was that they did not know their history. They felt lost. They've gone through slavery. They heard we sold them. Some have heard that they were, forced onto slave ships. Most people wanted to come to see at least where they were sent, from which areas on this African continent they were dispatched. Brothers, interacting with people in church, on campus, teaching students who feel that they want to know their history. They want to know where they come from. They want to know their ancestral heritage. They want to know their culture and traditions. so that they can feel as human beings. Without that, they felt they did not have anywhere to go forward. So in 1993, I was asked by the National Society for Black Engineers to speak to them. I had another occasion to talk to people about education and compare the differences between our education and their education. And I still came to the conclusion that we need to understand our history. So let me start briefly. Way back from the research that I did or carried out, way back in the year 4000 BCE, way back, we had about maybe 10 major groups in the whole continent of Africa. From the north, Chernife, Tassili, Badarian, Mero, Axum, and to the east we have the Puni, and then on the west we had Ghana, Tiamasas, Ajuku, Ukpa, and then in the central part of Africa we had the Congo, Roseby, and going down south, Zimbabwe, Khoi, and San. By 1000 BCE, we had Ghana in the west, Nok in the northwest, and Garmantie in the north, Kemet, Mero, and Nubia on the northeast, Axum, Congo, and so on. And we have the Zimbabwe, Khoi, and San still there. Now, these maps that I have here, unfortunately, I couldn't show them to you on the screen, made us understand that we had our empires, we had our cultures, we had our civilization, we had our own free trades. Our relatives moved from Ethiopia, from so-called Ethiopia and Kemet, Nubia, Egypt. They came down to West Africa. They did trade. Our people from the west coast of Africa also went to Egypt. And when the Muslims came down and brought in their religion, our people who were converted traveled from the west coast of Africa all the way to the east coast of Africa. So we see that way before, and archaeologists say, I'm not an archaeologist, but they say that we had a dispersion from East Central Africa, all the way to West Africa, to North Africa, to Europe, Middle East, and beyond. And right now, if we go to Australia, New Zealand, and some parts of even Japan and Asia, you will meet some of our people there, including India. African descent, African origin. So how come that people who were very, very rich in culture, in civilization, in technology, now are looked down by everybody else in the world, and we are cast down as nobody? We get our degrees, we struggle to go to the West, we want to be, whatever we want to be, we go there. We get our degrees, and then we think we are somebody. Even after independence, when so many people struggled, Africans united from Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda, Ben Bella, and all those people and all those names that emanated from the struggle for independence, based upon their experiences they had in the United States of America, in South America, in other places where our brothers and sisters were taken as slaves. When they did their best to bring independence to this continent, initially there was that euphoria, hey, independence, independence. But we did not have economic independence. So our political independence, starting from Ghana in 1957, and led by Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and others, was meant to keep us united as one force, one people, one continent, with one view and one aim. And we must learn that we ourselves became our own enemies due to lack of what? Unity. And with that, I see a trend. I'm not too old, I'm not too young, just 73 years old, but I've learned a few things that despite the fact that we have all these resources in our countries, we still are poor. Why? Because all the African exports, and they tell us, oh, no, you have to export, export, export. All our exports contribute only 1% of the exports that Europe has and America, the West has. And having lived there for 40 years, I've learned a lot. If we don't learn to love ourselves and learn our own languages, whether it's Swahili, Ghana, Twi, or whatever, Soninka, whatever, Wolof, or Bantu, or whatever languages we will select so that we can feel united, we'll continue to beat about the bush. So I will say, let's revisit our history. Let's bring back history into the curriculum, not, things that will demoralize our children and take their minds and their morality away, but history, the actual history of African people. We are diverse, but we should be united. We should not have our diversity become a stumbling block to us. So let's come to post-independence. We had the OAU organized. And we had detractors trying to divide us and rule us, so we could not come to a conclusion as to what we want to do as a united continental Africa, with its own common market, with its own high command, with its own, whatever it is that we have. We could have done a better job from 1960s to today. Now we all cite examples of, Hong Kong was like this, Singapore was like this, Malaysia was like Ghana, India was like Ghana before. How come Ghana is low and now we are behind and our waters are polluted and we don't have good drinking water and our children are sitting on the trees in classrooms where there are no proper, protection against the elements, the winds? How come that we don't have hospitals to take care of our children and our nursing mothers and those who are pregnant? How come that we don't even keep our own streets clean? Our environments are polluted. How come we cannot establish businesses here in this country? I'm not going to talk about the other countries because I don't know much about everything. But how come we cannot unite? 2-3 Africans uniting to put together businesses in their own communities. How come our communities don't have water when one borehole costs only 9,000 cedis? Why can't 3,000 cedis worth of school for our children? So whatever we do, let's recognize that education plays a role, very, very important role. And if you don't know your culture, if you don't know where you come from, you will learn somebody's culture, you will assimilate that culture, you will speak that language, and you think the more you know those languages, the better you are. You may be right. We are not excluding those languages. They are lingua francas that will help us and should help us to trade with external, countries and continents or economic blocks. Until we learn to know what we have in our continent, on this continent, starting from agriculture, natural resources, and everything in between, until we let our children also learn science and technology to become engineers, to become scientists, chemists who will also do certain kinds of analysis to know what we have. We'll continue to have an influx, whether it's from the West, from the East, or from China, or from wherever. They will keep on coming, pillaging our resources until we have nothing, until we buy food from the Chinese, until we buy water from somewhere. Even if our cocoa is taken somewhere, now you want to drink Milo or you want to drink ordinary cocoa drink, you may have to import it from China. Is that what we want to do? If not, let this African free continental trade agreements that we set bring to the forefront the role that our educational systems, our institutions, play in bringing the right human resources, not with old technologies that are no longer useful, but that are very current, abreast with what is going on in the rest of the world, so that we can do all things like them. We can produce our own things over here, so we don't have to import everything from outside.
All right.
And
so, Prof,
us.
Prof, you have just 3 minutes to make up your time. But
I'm
before,
done.
no, so want to ask you, how do we leverage on our cultural diversity to really achieve the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Okay,
Just
good.
within 2 minutes to end your session.
Okay. I believe that whatever the cultural issues are, we should put them aside. We should first of all start picking up some languages that we don't know and make them official languages for Africa. Next to the French and next to the English that we have, we should have at least 2 major languages or 3 major languages. Whether we have Swahili and we have Tree in the West and other things, whatever down there in the South, I don't care. But let's have some common languages that will be universal for all of us. Yeah. That will set a tone. Number 2, let's do developmental plans on the industrial side of things, agriculture, resource development, resource conservation. Let's do that in the context of our culture. What do we have around us? What makes us who we are? And let's also, our religions, also take into consideration the fact that we have a people, we have culture, we serve a living God, but we have a culture. They should not be antagonistic to one another. There should not be any mutual exclusivity, so that we can now educate, enlighten, and empower our people to do the right things, which we are trying to do now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Gregory. You have really outlined very, very important points that I don't want to make any mistake in really recapping what you've said. I believe that throughout the discussion, participants will bring out questions and we'll move into that. So we appreciate your time. We want to pick the thought of Dr. Alabi. So Dr. Alabi, you are joining us from London as well. When you look at the European Union and look at their economy, for example, you know, we have the Italians, we have the Portuguese, we have the Spanish, we have the English, and different cultural diversities. How were they able to really harness the diversities in their culture in making sure they were able to trade among themselves, taking into cognizance what is happening even now with their splits and whatever? How do we leverage on that knowledge as Africans to make sure that whether I'm from the north, south, east, or west of Africa, we need or we have a common goal to really ensure that we trade among ourselves? What lessons can we learn from that?
Good afternoon, panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'm going to ask or to start answering that question you just raised by picking up on the very last point that Professor Yosin made. And that is, if we don't know who we are,
very well,
then we will never know where we're going to go. So if you don't know your history, if you don't know your background, if you don't understand your culture, you will not know who you are or what you stand for, or even for that matter, how we arrive at where we have arrived at. So when it comes to the issue of culture, in the context of cultural discussions, and as a way of life of a people, a group of people, a community, a society, whether small or as wide as the continent of Africa, it is one thing that unites them, and that is the understanding of that way of life and what it means in terms of rights and responsibilities, but more importantly, mutual respect within that cultural setting for each other, and the way in which they go about, therefore, certain norms and patterns of behavior or acceptable behavior and practices, which in effect culminate in traditions and ultimately in the culture. Now let's talk about the Europeans that you've just mentioned. They were not united previously, not for many centuries they weren't. And I guess if history serves me my knowledge rightly, it was only in the course of the time that they were also empire building and going around the world. By the way, empire building not from within, or empire building from outside by destroying and pillaging and overtaking the resources of other nations. You cannot build if you don't have resource. So if you don't have it naturally, you have to look elsewhere. And whether you now acquire it legitimately through mutual exchange or by way of overtaking and oppressing the other side of the world where the resources belong, either way, that's the only way you can develop. So for us on the continent, it's an issue, very critical. What do we have that's attracted the Europeans, the Arabs, and anyone else who has set foot on the continent of Africa before, who are not originally from Africa? Let's look at that issue. What brought them in? What were they after? And at the end, what did they leave us with? And again, Professor Yosin has made a very valid point in terms of how they approach it, how they came to us initially by way of saying they have come peacefully to trade, and some came on the back of religion, and yes, they give us in exchange the Bible for our lands. And I'm not going to go beyond that. I think that quote has been repeated in many quarters in the past. But the point remains that unless we are united among ourselves, it is going to be difficult to actually progress and advance. A house divided within itself is not going to stand for long. If we cannot come to that unity and determine what will be the acceptable norms and practices and behavioral norms, if you like, that would constitute, in effect, our constitution that determines the way we deal with each other, first as human beings, and secondly, as people of the same continent, it's going to be difficult to set that agenda for progress in growth and development going forward. That's my view. Now, what have we done? Professor Yosin said on the issue of culture, language plays a very important part. Now, why? Because it's a means of communication. What that means is the translation and sharing of ideas so that there's understanding on both sides that you're talking about the same thing, and you hopefully want to try and establish some sort of relationship. The Inter-African Trade Agreement, especially in this case, becomes one of those instruments to hopefully help us determine and shape and form that relationship that will take us forward in this century and beyond. Now, I know for a fact that many years, decades ago, certainly many African countries, especially on the West African coast, traded with each other and are still continue to do that up to today. I know that there was a time, and up to now, this present times when Ghana, the Republic of Benin, Togo, I think used to be called Upper Volta before it became Burkina Faso, those countries traded with Nigeria by road. Likewise with Cameroon, and likewise going further up northeast of Nigeria towards Niger and the northwest of Nigeria. Those trade routes still exist up to today. But unfortunately, as Professor Yosin already said, the detractors came and disrupted the status quo, and we forgot who we are. We forgot that we used to trade with each other. We forgot that we used to buy from our neighbors, and our neighbors would buy from us. Now, it's interestingly, the politicians of today actually found in their own rightful judgment or wisdom, two-stage wisdom perhaps, that it was actually better for them to import rice from as far away as Asia or other parts of the world, or for that matter, to import palm oil from other parts of the world out of Africa, whereas there are African countries producing those same items, even salt. Imagine that a country close to each other, sharing borders that has been created by the Europeans, will actually rather import sugar or salt from America, from Asia, than to buy salt or sugar from a neighboring country producing the same. Likewise, cement, you name it, any of those resources that we needed in order to develop ourselves, we will not buy from within the continent. Why is that? You might ask me, is it because they're better quality outside? Not necessarily so. Is it because they're cheaper from outside? Not necessarily so. But for our own entrenched personal interest, unfortunately, and the unsavory rivalry, unfortunately, that's been created within the continent between the politicians and leaders of those countries meant that they will not trade with each other economically. Now, if you're going to develop the African free trade area more so, it is important that we understood the role that lifestyles and culture and traditions and customs, norms in particular, play in this within those individual countries, and how they could live and trade with each other comfortably if we respect each other's norms and cultures. What is acceptable in one country may not necessarily be acceptable behavior in another country. Perhaps within sub-regions and blocks within Africa, West Africa, perhaps the practices may be similar, but not so much so similar to those of the Eastern Africa and certainly not Southern Africa. But within each of those trade regions, there are at least commonalities that can be traded on between Kenya, for example, and Uganda, or Rwanda, for example, or indeed even go as far as Sudan or Ethiopia. It is possible to find commonalities through which we can exchange a trade between ourselves and keep the resources and the revenues and the returns from the resources that are generated and extracted from the ground of Africa, and keep those within the continent to develop further. We need to have mutual understanding. And how do you establish that? So Professor Yossi brought up the issue of language. I'm not too versed in many African languages, but Swahili I found very interesting. And in all the years that I've been doing trade missions to East Africa, I've always found a way to practice my Swahili. When I meet my East African friends, whether from Kenya or Tanzania or Uganda for that matter. And likewise, my Ghanaian friends, I don't speak much of Twi or Ga, I think is the other one you spoke, but I do practice occasionally when I can. For the Ghanaians who I mentor, either as students in this country who have graduated and gone back, or those who are in enterprise, in private business, who I still mentor up to today, I still try to practice those. It is important that you find a way to relate to the other person. That's what I'm saying. And unless we can demonstrate that clearly, then we're not going to go very far with this agenda of trying to do trade with each other.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Alabi. You're bringing key points, and I'm so much excited that throughout the conversation, we are really looking at language and how to leverage on our commonalities among ourselves in the various regions. And I'm sure that is the pathway in making sure that we're able to leverage on our diversity as well. But let me bring in Dr. Walid Makuku. Dr. Walid Makuku, you are a Zimbabwean, and I can confirm for a fact that you are now working in Ghana. And beyond that, you have worked on the African continent, traveling, implementing projects in higher education, quality assurance. What lessons would you bring up in making sure that despite our differences in culture, despite our differences in history, despite our differences in language, we are still able to trade and work among ourselves? What lessons will you import into the implementation of the African Free Trade Area, looking at not only those who are literate, but those who are not even literate as well? Thank you.
But I want to check from the first speaker who talked about our historical perspective. And I just want to concur with him that, in fact, that has made us our own enemies. When I travel to other countries, I've seen basically two groups of people. People who are proud to be associated with Africa. People who fall into my category, who are proud to be black. Even if I were even darker than what I am, I wouldn't do anything to change my skin color. Then among us also, there are people who feel offended that they are black. And as we do the operations, I just want to look at it in a broader context to say, what is arts and culture? Arts and culture involves our food. And when I'm talking about us indigenous African people, because he said before colonialism, which means there are certain people who came into our continent and they were indigenous people who stayed in this continent. The Aborigines, they are original in their what? The Eskimos, the what? You know, so in each continent, they are the indigenous people of those continents. And now, when I look at it, I just say from there, it's colonialism came, we were colonized. We need to decolonize the mind for us to be successful with the African Continental Free Trade Area. How should we do it? We need to appreciate our skin color, appreciate our languages, appreciate our food, appreciate our arts and culture. People don't know that people from other continents are paying a fortune to see our dances, to see our clothes, our necklaces, our beads. And now, if we want the African Continental Free Trade Area to be successful, we decolonize our mind. And I say to myself, I need to trade in yam. I need to trade in wild fruits. I need to trade in our own dances and music. So I'm talking of arts and design, artifacts, music, food, clothes, and services. And you know, when people come in for tourism, those are some of the things that they are coming for. And I think if we look at intra-Africa trade to begin with, what can we do for each other to appreciate what prevails in each other's African country? Yeah. When I go to, and Kwesi, I like the way you have put it, that I'm a well-traveled person outside the continent and within the continent. So I want to give my personal example. When I go to Namibia to facilitate an Association of African Universities workshop, from Ghana here, fortunately I'm a diplomat, and so nobody will search my bags. I get my shea butter, I get my Ghana prints. Those are the things which are needed in Namibia, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Dubai, in Black Shop. So by that, at a smaller scale, I'm even able to have Ghana products appreciated elsewhere. So what do we need to do now? Looking at the African Continental Free Trade Area, let us not forget that we are looking at enhancing African trade. So what I would do, which I've already started, is I've picked a contact person in Namibia, a contact person in Kenya, a contact person in Cameroon, and once in a while we have a Zoom meeting. We don't necessarily need to move to each other. And so to meet personally, no, today there's technologies. Let's leverage on technologies. So when we have our Zoom meeting, I'm telling them, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want headaches because I'm sending you things to sell for me. No, while you are there, market and look for your customers for shea butter, for African print from Ghana, and for Black Shop, and any other products which are of interest for fish, even for fish. When you do that, when you are in your area, you tell me, Doc, we are ready. We want so many kilograms of shea butter, so many kilograms of fish, yam. Why not yam? When in Zimbabwe, we don't have the conducive climate to do yam and cassava. But we know, ladies and gentlemen, there's one thing I want you to know. Don't shun your food. Don't shun your wild fruits. Some people are making drugs in other continents with our own herbs, which we shun. And so that's why I talked about decolonizing the mind. Those things which we think they make us and closer to people of lighter skin, actually they laugh at us and they capitalize on us, because the moment you deny your own skin color, you are subjecting yourself to be abused. The moment you say, I always want white rice, when brown rice is the one which solves all issues of cholesterol, of blood pressure, of diabetes, What are you telling me? Trade in brown rice. And I wanted to ask, where will our products go? What are we going to trade in? I've already responded to what we are going to trade in. But even when we do intra-Africa trade, let's now introduce these zones where we can do intra-Africa trade and where we can organize ourselves now to export brown rice to other continents. Can't we do that? They are also exporting to us and we import. So why are we not exporting brown rice and shea butter at a much higher price? That's my worry also. Why do you always want to say, if it is a deal, a black person 20%, a person from another continent 80%, why don't you fight for a better percentage? If you are the one who are going to get the shea butter, process it to such an extent that someone is going to only put it and mix it with ingredients to make soap or to make a detergent. Why do you settle for 20%? It's looking down upon yourself as a black person that you are not able, your things are inferior. And all those are part and parcel of our arts and culture and our historical background. So we need to work on those things.
Yeah.
I think I'm already excited. I'm learning a lot. Dr. Makuku rightly mentions two key things. Trading in our indigenous products, which is very, very important if we want to trade among ourselves. Very great. Don't forget that you can bring in your questions and your comments and your suggestions as well. Those of you who are joining from the Zoom platform, please put your comments in the chat. If you are joining us on social media, please ask your questions, make a comment, and we'll read and also ask our panelists for you as well. We are having two comment from Bernard Tieku or Bernard Tieki. Bernard says, I agree. What can we do to help each other? We need to support each other and collaborate on this beautiful continent of ours. I agree with you, Bernard. Let me pick that of Miss ST. Miss ST says, it's obvious we have serious issue of trust among ourselves as Africans. We do not appreciate what we have. This is an issue of mental slavery. And with this said, how do we empower the new generation at least to help them see themselves differently and how to do things that will help us develop as a continent? Thank you. And that is exactly the point that Dr. Victor or Mr. Victor is going to really answer. So let me get to our final panelist. He is the head of department, Lancaster University, Department of Law. So Mr. Victor, you are fortunate to be the last panel member. What do you make of all the contributions that are in already, right from the three panelists? And then you can add yours as well.
Well, thanks for the very broad question. I think we've had some really interesting contributions from all the three panelists. I particularly enjoyed Violet's contribution because it overlapped the most with mine. I agree to some extent with the issues that were raised by the first two speakers, in that it's useful to start from a historical perspective when we are talking about issues relating to international trade and culture, because there is a lot of cultural diversity that is on the continent. And there is an argument to be made that the extent of diversity that we have throughout the continent is not inuring to greater international trade and cooperation amongst African countries. I am quite optimistic about the chances of the African Free Trade Area to increase the levels of trade and the levels of cooperation amongst African countries, despite the cultural differences that I've mentioned, despite sort of the historical interruptions to our togetherness that has been caused by colonialism, despite the language issues that exist. And the reason I say this is that, well, if you look at international free trade agreements such as this, particularly what is potentially the most successful one in Europe. You know, Europe has really the same levels of cultural diversity as Africa has. It consists of a number of different countries. They all speak their own languages. On top of that, these countries haven't exactly gotten along very well. You know, the EU came out of the EEC, which basically, yes, it came out of a process that was a response to a world war. You know, the countries of Europe had basically gone to war and engaged in an extremely violent conflict amongst each other. And they came out of that conflict and decided to take deliberate steps to increase economic cooperation amongst themselves. And by so doing, increasing sort of greater cultural and therefore creating a benefit and a financial benefit for their citizens. And it has worked. And so I feel that on our continent, we should take the same approach, in that what we need to do is to realize that the success of the African Free Trade Area, it will lead to say greater economic benefits throughout the continent. But in creating that greater economic benefit throughout the continent, you will also be increasing national benefits. You will also be increasing the size of national economies. I mean, yes, basically cooking down and sort of expanding opportunities throughout Africa. And once African leaders and African businesses realize the economic benefits of greater economic cooperation, we'll see that the efforts at increasing trade will just happen organically even by themselves. Now, think about the fact that when we started the AFCTA process, the extent of inter-African trade was about 3%. In the sense that only 3% of African trade was between African countries. The rest was basically Africans trading with Europe, Asia, and sort of the rest of the world. Just shortly after this process has begun, that's improved to 18%. Wow. Just the process of coming together to think through what kind of institutions we need to come up with, what kind of structures, how it's going to work, how we're going to improve greater economic cooperation, that has brought up the figure by sort of 15 percentage points. So we are at the beginning of this process, and there are going to be obstacles. No free trade area happens easily. It's not happening easily in the European Union, as you can see with Brexit, etc. There are those of you who follow issues related to NAFTA. You'll know that NAFTA is struggling at the moment, particularly under the previous US president. And so this process is not going to be seamless or easy either. But the African leaders sort of have to just take the position that this is not just in their national interest, but by furthering the national interest, you will also be improving the continental outlook and also improving the outlook for the citizens of the country. Let me just make one reference to what Dr. Violet said, which I particularly liked, and that was the impact of the trade relations on non-traditional and indigenous exports. So the fact that once we start trading amongst each other, we create new markets in other African countries for products that were hitherto just sold in Ghana or sold from Ghana and sent to the Ghanaian diaspora in the UK or the Ghanaian diaspora in the US. Now we may perhaps find that Kenyans have an interest in some of the things that are created here. You may find that Zimbabweans have an interest in some of the items that are created here. We may find that we in Ghana may have an interest in Zimbabwean cultural artifacts. And I'll give you just one example from this. I lived in Zimbabwe for a fairly long time. I was just telling Dr. Violet just off the air, like I feel that I'm an honorary Zimbabwean. I lived there. I lived on Samora Machel Avenue in Belvedere in Harare. I went to St. George's. So, yes, yes. And my sister went to the convent. I'm basically Zimbabwe. I don't speak Shona, but you know, if there's one country that I feel affiliated to or have an affinity to, it's Zimbabwe. We were living there. My family sort of lived there in our youth, and from our time there are still cultural artifacts in our house to this day. Because Zimbabweans, I think Violet confirmed this, you like to make things out of copper. There are lots of copper cultural artifacts that when you go to a market in Zimbabwe, you sort of see them. We have them in our house. And every single time Ghanaians come and they see them, they love them. They always ask, where did you get this? Where is it from? And I say, oh, it's from Zimbabwe. There's no way you can get it anywhere. But there's clearly a market for it.
Yes.
You know, so these are the kinds of cultural exchanges that we're hoping that an international free trade agreement such as this will encourage.
And so we just took the first round. These are some of the summary of what we had gone through. Some of the key points: decolonize our mind, accept what we have, impact we should have, intra-Africa trade, which is precious to us, things that we believe in, that which would also create a different market. What is our impact when we do this? It would impact on us internationally. It would impact nationally. We would grow our economies. And then also a point from Mr. Broby saying that it would not be easy. That is what we should understand. It would not be easy, but it has been done some way. The EU has done it. Why that approach can't be done here in Africa? And so before we even take the next round of questions, go on talking about technology, how it would impact on culture and everything. But just before we take that, I would want to ask, what should be the critical role? This will go to Mr. Brobe because of his legal background. What should be the role of government in pushing our culture for the development of the continent? Because, you know, sometimes the bureaucracy, the red tapeism is so much that some of these things are said and are even signed, but it doesn't manifest, it doesn't come to light. And so what should African governments do, since this is for us? What should they do for us to see there is improvement?
Well, firstly, they should do a better job doing gatekeeping and protecting from African culture. So there is a lot of cultural appropriation that is taking place in respect of our indigenous culture. We are seeing sort of multiple examples of things that are culturally uniquely African being produced elsewhere and then being sold back to us. So the first order of business really is for African governments to sort of step up to the plate and ensure that our culture is being protected from, you know, sort of external persons who might appropriate it to their benefit. The second thing that needs to happen is that the states themselves need to put in legal rules and legal regulations that allow for Africans to benefit from their own culture. So this is in terms of intellectual property type rules that allow for persons that are engaged in cultural events, that allow for persons that are just making music, involved in arts, performing in theaters, are able to benefit economically from the products of their of their minds, from the cultural products of their minds, so to speak. That's, you know, it's all very well having a creative economy, but if that creative economy is going to play sort of a key role in your GDP, the state has to put in structures to allow for that to happen. And the third thing that sort of really needs to happen is that we need to put in place structures that permit the kinds of cross-cultural cultural interactions that will increase the markets for African culture. So it's one thing enjoying a Ghanaian cultural troupe in Accra, but it's not just in Ghana or in West Africa that we may enjoy those items. We may, their markets might be significantly broader than Ghana and West Africa. Yeah. In the same way, in the few instances in which, for example, we've had South African cultural events take place in Ghana, and I'm sure you'll recall some of them. Yeah. You will find that the interest amongst Ghanaians is quite significant. You'll find that the interest of Ghanaians in the cultures of other countries, in their artists, in their films, or other African countries, I should say, is quite high. And this has been facilitated by technology, but it's been facilitated by having multi-choice in Ghana. But what will encourage this more is if it's easier for there to be international travel and international links between countries. So I'm happy that one of the focus areas of the AFCTA is the creation of infrastructure, and the creation of transport infrastructure in particular, because it's that kind of those kinds of developments that will allow for
transportation of goods and services,
particularly services, and services in this case being sort of cultural events and cultural services that can go across borders much easier if the objectives of the AFCTA are to be realized.
Right. So thank you very much, Mr. Broby. We've talked a lot about culture, we've talked a lot about art, but we know that now these are possible through, and one of the drivers, the special drivers of arts and culture is technology. And so I can sit here, log on to Netflix, and I can see whatever is going on, US, UK, India, South Korea, wherever it is that I am. So how do we leverage on technology to foster production, exchange cultural goods and services in the fourth industrial revolution? Some say that we are not even there yet. We are not even in our third revolution to get to the fourth. But how do we leverage on technology to show to the world this is what Africa has? I would give a slight example in Ghana, for instance. When the coronavirus came, when the lockdown came, that was when people were all over Netflix asking for accounts. But we realized our industry died. The Ghanaian film industry, arts and culture industry died because we were not able to leverage on technology. And now we are calling for the cinemas to be open. Whilst we could have leveraged on technology to do that. So we want to know, we want to ask, that how do African countries leverage on technologies to push forth our culture and art?
Thank you very much, Irene, and that's a good question. You know, earlier I just mentioned that I linked up with people in different countries, but I don't go there. Right. But finally, goods are just going to those places. So let me take everyone back a bit to say, if you look at the key thing that we need to have in our continent, it's the ICT infrastructure and the internet services. So at the helm we need our national governments to bring in more of the nodes, ICT technologies and internet services, which even go to the rural areas. Because like now, you see this event which we are having here. Can you imagine that somebody, somewhere, who might have benefited from this cannot see it and will never see it because where they are, they don't have a smartphone. Even if they had a smartphone, they don't have electricity to key in, to drive the gadgets. They do not have a node which gives them powerful internet services and also the ICT infrastructure that can take these things to all those areas. Remember, for us to be successful with the African Continental Free Trade Area, we need to involve everybody through education and awareness. Right. The radio, it's part of the technology. Is it getting to the rural areas? And we have translation on the radios, Ga, Chi, Shona in my country, and so that when we go there to say, pack your cocoyam for us, weigh it, give us a price which is better because now we can exploit them. Go and now charge a good price. And I also put a markup and we all stand to benefit. So we need that from the national government. Right. So when we have good ICT infrastructure and internet services, we now use them. Is it for filmmaking? Is it for covering our events? Is it for education and awareness? We go there, we can connect anywhere now to start re-showing this event which we are having. Yeah. I want to give a very interesting example. So sometime this year in South Africa, there was a festival which was called the Jollof Rice Festival. Right. You know, Jollof is, there's a rival views between Nigerian and Ghanaian Jollof. Yeah. So what they did, in a country which is not Nigeria, in a country which is not Ghana, they did the festival in South Africa. Right. And then, because of technologies, and now the video is going all over. The media is taking it all over. In that case, Ghana won. I'm going to share with you later. And you know the war of jollof rice, ours is better than yours. But one thing which I want to support say from Lancaster University, which he said is that if we are to try and do this, we open new markets. Can you imagine those who were at that festival, who tasted the jollof, and I'm sure there was extra cooked for sale. You wouldn't taste for free. You can taste a bit, but when you want to buy, they were supposed to be huge pots for you to buy from. And that way now, we leverage on technology. Let me add a little bit again to say, with technology, remember, it's not only the events, but it's also the marketing aspect. The marketing aspect is very, very key. How are we going to do the marketing? Social media. Right. Let's go to our Instagram, show the shea butter, show the yoi. I like yoi, that wild fruit. And I've always said, if people from Southern Africa could taste yoi, Ghana would export a lot of yoi to other countries. But because it's a wild fruit, can I export a wild fruit? Why not? So put yoi on Instagram, put it on Facebook, put it on all the social media handles that we know. Put it on Twitter. And then you can have a few to supply, because the marketing aspect, let's not forget, it is the thing which is going to get us there.
Yeah.
How will people know of the product?
Yeah.
Because I always say you can be a very good hairdresser, a very good tailor, but if you don't market yourself, you will do nobody a product, and at the end of the day, you remain the same.
Yeah.
Same with our foodstuffs, our arts and culture. Let's push them using the technologies. So there's the marketing platforms which we need. Those are ICT driven, and we need internet services.
Yeah.
There is the conversations, the discussions now on the modalities of how they are going to be purchased. Yeah. And those we can use the Zoom platforms and what other platforms of communication which are available. Until you know the product can go. Whilst you never reach where these products are going in the continent. And so until even the transportation itself, you can track it, but it goes there, the shipping, you are searching for which is the best shipper, and you are doing it in the comfort of your office or of your home. Yeah. So there's a lot that we can pre-do with technology before the shipping of the product.
I know you have a lot on your sleeve to say, but we also have to give those on our virtual platform to make their opinions on this subject. So, Kwesi, over to you, to our online panelists and our facilitators on our next series of questions. Thank you very much.
So this is coming from Dr. Sharif Alabi. He says, start with languages. Embrace and celebrate our cultural diversity and heritage. Educate the youth about these. Connect communities, urban and rural. Promote and exchange local knowledge and indigenous skills. Open cross-border trade and promote cooperative and collaborative trade policies and practices.
Right.
Tackle the culture of corruption, especially in public offices, port and land borders. That is absolutely on point. And Ms. ST says that I totally agree with you, Dr. Alabi. I think we all agree with you. TK Bernard is asking, saying all of us on this call are part of the more privileged world. I'm not too sure what his comment is, but I'm sure he will come back and let us know what exactly he means by that. Maybe he's saying that all of us here on this platform are the privileged few in Africa, and so we need to broaden the discussion to include those who may not be privileged.
Yeah, in the rural areas who don't have access to internet.
Sure, you will provide more feedback. All right, so we are moving to the next set of the conversation, which has to do with peace security, which Irene rightly introduced. And so I will start with Professor Gregory. You will agree with me that because we are having continental free trade area, there is also supposed to be free movement across the continent. And looking at issues with peace and security, what do you think are some of the core things we need to take into consideration? On the continent, we hear of the Boko Haram, we hear of the xenophobia attacks, we hear of other security issues, but how safe is our security apparatus as a continent, and what must we take into consideration? I think Dr. Gregory will take first, and then Dr. Alabi will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. This is a very interesting question. Peace and security, first of all, comes very easily to those who sit down and decide, talk about the problems, the issues, and how to solve them. We don't always have to agree, but we can agree to disagree. Our political systems are so diverse as our indigenous, tribal, and maybe regional systems. Within each country, we have the local governments and the political establishments. How well we coordinate our security issues between the local systems and the regional and possibly continental security issues will depend on how well we see ourselves as brothers and sisters with a common goal and with a common ideal. Let me start by saying that we are doing these things. I mean, the African free continental free trade is not being done in a vacuum. It's being done within a complex system of infrastructure worldwide, politically, economically, socially, and technologically. Whereas we are fighting among ourselves and we don't even recognize the fact that we are Africans sometimes, because media menti P. I don't speak the language you are. But I mean, if you can't speak the Queen's English, you are not part of me. Then we break the possibilities of uniting our culture, using our culture as a unifying force, our languages, our traditions, our way of, we just heard about a lot of things. But once we don't see ourselves as one people, or a united group of people, there will always be conflicts. And the results of these conflicts, apart from the external, possible external ones, are internal ones. Family feuds lead to little feuds within the tribe, and then the clans, and the next thing you know, people are fighting for a piece of land, fighting for this, fighting for that. The next thing you know, now we're having a big war. Example, the Biafran War. Example, that which happened in Rwanda between the Tutsis and the Hutus. We don't want to encourage that. But we must be aware that at the same time, the external detractors are the same forces that are infiltrating into our files and our ranks. In our governments, in our villages, they come, they pay us a little bit of money here and there, corruption here, bribery there, inducement here, and the next thing we know, we are selling our own countries, our own people, our own countries, and our own continent. Let's not forget that certain people within our own ranks sold our people too into slavery because they wanted something like a little bit of money or here and there. Having said all that, if we tackle the internal security systems, we can be united in such a way that it will be very, very difficult for external forces to invade. The next thing that we have to look at is external forces. Are the external forces that are infiltrating? Everywhere we go, we see their hallmarks. Coup d'etats, insurrections, so-called revolutions, all emanate from, if you probe very carefully, external forces that are behind those things. So how do we solve those problems? I would say on the local level, let our families get united, know themselves, and solve problems or issues among them and their neighbors. Let the chiefs be chiefs, not only to sell lands, but also to bring peace into their own areas. We go to the next level. We have the district executives. What can they do together with the forces that we have, the police, the national security agencies? What can we map out? What can we do? What are the hot points that we should address? And then now we're using technology. It's easy to disseminate information. Then we go to the next point. On the regional level, on the state level, and then come to ECOWAS region or South African, Eastern African, or whatever Central African regions. Systematically, we can now map out a common area and common strategy of getting our securities from the grassroots. And once we do that, we'll be moving forward. And the AU should be able to supervise this and do it effectively without people being bought and being dictated by other external forces to do what is good for Africans. I rest my case.
All right, thank you very much. I like the sequence in which you gave your recommendations, right from the family system to the community leaders as chief, to the country leaders, to the regional leaders, and also to the African Union. That was very, very splendid. Thank you so much. But we still would want to ask Dr. Alabi the same question. Even though looking at our continent as at now, we will say that our security apparatus has improved, just as we have in the Agenda 2063, the African Union envisaged that by 2020, all guns should have been silent in Africa. How well do you think we can leverage on our security apparatus to ensure that we're able to implement a seemingly smooth African free continental trade area where people can travel from one country to another without any fear of being kidnapped, fear of being killed, or fear of anything that may happen to you on a continent?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Again, I'm going to say thank you to my dear brother, colleague, Professor Yosin, who's taking this issue, obviously from a much wider perspective. Yes, it's absolutely crucial that we understood exactly what we're doing. And having the policy in place is not the same as implementing the policy. And having the right guidelines to implement the policy also is not the same as making sure policy is adhered to, and where, as I said previously, there's evidence of non-compliance, then what do we do to enforce, and where necessary to institute not so much of punitive measures, but perhaps, I guess, sanctions to make sure that people are brought into line. The issue with the major organs that we have on the continent, whether you want to talk about the AU or what was previously NEPAD as organs, and the African Development Bank, these are the ones that are meant to coordinate the efforts at the higher level. However, there's no point in having higher level, macro level policies that are not translatable to real practical action steps forward, if you like, at the grassroots level, not including those who are going to be likely influencing the policy implementation at the ground level is a mistake. And yes, I am aware of instances where there's been, with good intent, there are policies created which failed woefully when it came to the point of implementation, because the people that sit in the municipal offices who don't engage the local chiefs or head of communities, as you put them, obviously have failed to realize the role that cultural governance, traditional governance play in a modern world. And if you want to do everything simply by way of the modern politics, so to speak, in terms of democratic government elections, it will not always work, because there are those who are the custodians of the land before we adopt to the Western style democratic governance system of governance that we now play all around Africa. The custodians of the land are the heads of the communities, the chiefs who are close to their people. They are the ones that will make the thing happen. They are the ones that will mobilize the people to help you to get whatever you want to work. I was involved, privileged to be involved in a conversation with the UN Global Compact Network Group back in February, March this year on similar issues of national policy and integration for Nigeria, and what can be done in terms of mobilizing and implementing the national policy on ethics and practices, certainly to ensure that everyone participates in the space that's been created. The part of the recommendations, for example, was from a private sector point of view, that there are policies that could be created and not so much forcibly enforced, but that could be encouraged for those practitioners in the private sector to embrace, so that within their procurement and supply chain practices, for example, certain things need to be there. If you want to participate in government procurement programs, in contract tendering and so on and so forth, if you're not including certain members of society, segments of society, if your programs or policy is not diverse enough to embrace young people, older people, women, or those even who are maybe disadvantaged by way of some form of disability, then we cannot progress as a nation. A friend of mine recently published a book which was launched 3 weeks ago. I happen to be a contributor to that book as well, which specifically discusses the role of women in the workplace from the perspectives of a male. And one of the things we said again is that I made it clear that any society that's willing to leave behind a segment of its community is not going to progress or advance. And by whatever way or shape or form of means of that this inclusiveness, so to speak, or non-embracing of certain member society. Similarly, just 2 days ago, someone contacted me from Nigeria, again on the subject of conflict, which is actually ravaging most of the African countries, certainly in Nigeria, I know certainly in Ethiopia, and some other parts of the continent where there is no peace yet. And if you don't have peace, you cannot sit at the same table and expect to have dinner. You're either on the table or you're on the menu. And if you're on the menu, they'll have you for dinner. So, but creating the space to accommodate everyone, to welcome everybody on board, to contribute in a positive manner towards what is being discussed, I think is useful. This issue with Nigeria currently, the young man who contacted me, they were looking to help deal with the issues of the lack of integration, the lack of cooperation, the lack of cooperation even between the several ethnic groups, so that from their perspective, an Igbo man sees himself as an Igbo man or woman. Likewise, the Yorubas, likewise the Hausas, and yet we're meant to belong to the same country. So if we can't even do that on a country level, national level, how much more can we expect to achieve when we're talking continentally? This is actually absolutely crucial. He made the point that we have NGOs who come into the space to say they're dealing with the issues of maternal deaths and therefore providing some sort of support for women who are nursing mothers or women who are going through pregnancies for whom our health systems cannot support, or indeed in the education system where many have been left behind. Well, how come there's no NGO coming in to help us deal with the issues of our lack of cooperation among ourselves? And he came to the conclusion and realization that actually no one is going to come in to help us do that. If we cannot deal with that issue ourselves, then we cannot look externally for that sort of solution. So it comes back to us at the end of the day. If it's going to happen, it is up to us to make it happen. The security apparatus across the continent may be doing their job in terms of what the various agencies have come together to do, but they're not doing so well in their own respective countries. And unfortunately, again, I go back to that point, the distractors are the ones that are infiltrating our systems and are creating these problems for us. Yeah, all I'm saying is that until we remove the element of the self-interest, to understand that at the end of the day, we are same and one common people with one common goal, and commit ourselves to pursuing that one common goal. It's going to be a long time before we get to the realization of the true achievement of what the opportunities presented for us with the free trade agreement.
All right, thank you very much. One common people and one common goal. And once we begin to work among ourselves and exist peacefully at the national level, that would be a reflection of what to expect even at the global, the continental level. That was very fantastic. And I think that in the comment, someone is also proposing that we need to have strong security apparatus on our borders and also on our port to ensure that there is free trade, free movement of people and goods as well. Yes, that is very important. We need to have a stronger security on our border system so that I can travel all the way from Togo to Benin to Nigeria to Cameroon and then to Congo without any fear of losing my life. That is the free trade we're talking about. Thank you for that comment. We'll go straight to Dr. Makoku for her final word. And she's tackling both the peace aspect and also the culture aspect. And then Dr. Robe also tackled the peace aspect and also the culture aspect.
Thank you very much. I think the earlier speakers, the two speakers who covered issues of peace did justice. They touched on the key two issues which really affect us. There are external forces which bring destabilization to our continent. How do we treat them? If we just look at them and say we leave them like that, where will it lend us to? Because it means each time we want to do a successful endeavor, some people come and disrupt it, can't we be bold enough to say, leave us alone, we want to do our own things? Can't we expose them?
Yeah.
Can't we talk about it and say enough is enough? And then internally also, issues of peace and security come out of misunderstandings, intolerance, and lack of accommodation. I think when we started the discussion, I talked a lot about tolerance, accommodation, because sometimes we may not really be agreeing, but at the same time, we focus on the common goal. If we have a common goal, we can shelve some of our differences for our common good. And that is the key message and take home, which I would say. Because if we concentrate on common goals, eventually those common goals are going to bring us together. So those are my words. And then we need, as much as possible also, to expend our energies in things that bring sustainable development. Yes, so overall, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say, if we don't know who we are, if we do not appreciate ourselves in terms of our arts and culture, and culture is made up of a number of things. We talk of our languages, our food, our music, our traditions, and all. We need not shun them. Let's have a new game or new games from Africa, which will be on the league tables. Even if we start competing on our own, again, people will come around and pay to see how we play these games. And so this is what I have to say in my final words. If we don't love ourselves, we are undermining ourselves for abuse, and we will always don't believe in ourselves and our initiatives. The last one is people want more of talking. Let us see action. And more action. There's too much talking.
Mr. Brombe, your final words. What is our take home from all that we have discussed?
It's a few things. I just on the question of peace, I think that yes, it is an important factor, and it's something that we should be concerned about. But we should also keep in mind that of the 53 African countries that we have on this continent, most of them are peaceful. There are maybe 5 to 10 that are engaged in some sort of fairly high level internal conflict. And in terms of conflict amongst countries, that very, very rarely happens on our continent. So it's not as sort of as violent a continent as it's portrayed to be. It's a largely peaceful continent in my view. So in terms of obstacles to trade, peace and security is an important one, but it's not the main one. It's really having the self-interests of the countries realigned to realize that the arrangements, trade arrangements such as these, lowering taxes, allowing for goods to cross borders, allowing for people to cross borders easily, those things will actually happen and allow economic progress to happen. Because think about it in these terms, sort of go back quickly to the question of peace. The main thing that gives an incentive for there to be peace is the presence of prosperity. So the more prosperous countries are, the less likely they are to degenerate into conflict. And so the focus for me really should be in the many countries that are relatively stable, on encouraging prosperity, and that would also sort of lead to peace and allow for economic and trade cooperation to occur.
So thank you, Mr. Broby. And so we would want to also ask some few words from our online guests, our virtual facilitators. And so, Prof. Alabi, what do you have for us, our take home for all the discussions that we have? we've had.
Quick one for today. I think one, I suspect that we need to work with the people on the local level. We need to work with those in government who are in charge of policies. We need to get close to them, have our inputs from both the public sector and private sector perspective, whether in education or otherwise. Let us realize that this requires a join up effort in coordination, and unless we're heading the same way, the same direction at the same time, coordinated, then everything will become not so, not so productive in that sense. And it would be a long journey ahead, but the 1,000-mile journey, they say, starts with the first step. But if we keep focus, it will be the best way for us to move forward on the continent, avoiding and ignoring digital trust regardless.
Right. Thank you very much. So we'll take the last one from Professor Yosen. Prof, if you can hear me kindly in a minute, give us your closing remarks, and then officially we can bring a close or close the curtain on the program. We would also invite our audience to come in for their questions, for their comments. And so if you're online, you can put it in the chat. Kwesi will read them. But if you would also want to speak, you can kindly use the raise hand button on Zoom. Kwesi would allow you to speak. So, Professor Yosen, your few words before we go to our audience. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Some of the root causes of peace and security breaches are internal. And I wanted to add this very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Internal disruptions, internal upheavals, internal, this miscontent or whatever it is that people have starts from within. And the next thing you know, it explodes. Let's look at the African youth now. Where do they stand vis-a-vis where we are going? A lot of the youth spend time trying to go to school. Their parents spend a lot of money to educate them. They finish, they have no jobs. They have no income. They work the streets, selling anything they can. And if it doesn't work there, they go to the main capital, big cities, looking for jobs. The same thing happens. No jobs, no accommodation, nothing to make them feel like they have graduated from university. It's one of the reasons why I came back home, because I felt when I came 10 years ago that our youth need help. And when you ask them what the problem is, nobody wants to hire me. Why didn't they want to hire you? Because they say, I don't have experience. If I don't have experience, where can I get experience if nobody wants to hire me? And then frustration sets in. And then the next thing you know, everybody talks. And then through social media or otherwise, certain things start. And the next thing you know, there's an internal upheaval. So our people, especially those in governments in Africa, should pay attention to those areas where our youth are very, very disenfranchised and they are not content. And if you don't do that and solve the problem, whereby they can be accessing good water, good drinking water, nice roads, food, whatever it is, housing, and even motor bicycles or whatever it is, we are not going to solve internal peace. The second thing, take home for everyone. If we don't love ourselves and we don't believe in ourselves and our capabilities and our abilities to do things for ourselves, and we always want even somebody to come, like an NGO to come and build toilet for us in our villages and towns, right, or for people to come and build, boreholes so that we can get good potable drinking water, or we cannot even help people to now have passable or whatever motorable roads for them to bring in the foodstuffs that they've grown. If our children in the hinterland, in the villages, are not able to get the medicine or the health care that they need, the education that they need, and the accessibility to the technologies we're talking about, there will always be internal strife. Yeah. And therefore, we open ourselves to external forces coming in, cajoling us with a little bit of money, put something into our mouths, and we are so happy that somebody is better than we are because we are not able to solve our own problems. We always want to go for aid. We always want somebody to come and bring us money. We are always looking for external forces or external agencies to bring us money. What about the money that we have? What about the resources we have in our own continent? Why can't we study and train our students, our people, to be manufacturers, to be productive engineers, rather than even those who have been hired going to sit down in the offices and read newspapers? We should get them engaged. And I am one of those people who I am culpable myself as a professor. I think with the few years that I have left, I'm going to do my best to encourage and help these young people who are into robotics, into automation, into drone technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all those kind of things that are now very, very, very common in other countries. I would like to help people so that we can advance our developmental projects in the villages, in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Gregory Yosin, and thank you to Professor Alabi, and then to Dr. Makuku and Mr. Robe for your insightful thoughts that you've shared with us. We'll go straight to open the platform to our distinguished participants. If you have any question, just put your hand up, click the raise hand button, and we will enable your microphone for you to speak. But I'm going to read few comments coming in, and this is from Benatieku again. He tried to clarify his earlier message. He says, I was trying to say that there are so many people that will never hear this conversation or be able to participate. So you are right. But a good conversation is the one that never ends, and so we'll try our best to zero in for people. Also, from Tieku again, we need to believe in ourselves and capabilities and the capabilities of our young people. So right, we undermine ourselves and each other. Certainly well said. Thank you so much. If you have any question, any comment coming in, or if you want to speak, make a contribution, just put your hand up. We will enable your microphone for you to speak. But Irene, just as we are waiting for our participant, these are some few take-homes that I have. Number one, we all know for a fact that language is very key in terms of cultural diversity. And so we need to ensure that we learn more languages, more African indigenous languages. And that is one of the points I picked from Professor Yosin, which is very key. So we need young people who will learn Swahili, who will learn the Twi language, and who will learn other local languages to be able to interpret in as much as we are trading among ourselves. I also picked one from Dr. Labi, which says that we need to leverage on our commonalities within the East African region, within the South African region, within the Western African region, and the North Central. What are the commonalities? And I think that we need to have a start point from there. We need to leverage on our commonalities to ensure that we're able to trade among ourselves as well. And then critical of it is also we being able to decolonize our mindset and love our indigenous products. And I think that is very important. So how do we package our music? How do we package our cultural stories, our folklores and others? How do we package them? How do we package our food and everything? We need to love ourselves, embrace ourselves. And then also I picked education and cultural cohesion. Education through cultural cohesion, that is very much important, and also improving our border security and peace as well. All right, James.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and the panel that's together. Very much appreciate to join you in this discussion. I would like to make a contribution in terms of a comment per se, because really what we lack in the AFCT as it were at the moment is lack of information to the grassroots. So I'd like to urge our professors and scholars within the African continent, probably they should develop a curriculum that should be put into the universities to be able to teach students to be able to take into account of what is happening at the continent. at the moment, because we know there are too many units that are taught in universities. Some are a bit irrelevant, but if we were to package the African free continental area or the aspirations that we have in the continent, and then take them down to the grassroots in the universities and the colleges, with the time, students and people within the continent will be able to learn and assimilate whatever that is taking place in the continent. They can move forward then together and build themselves for the future. Another thing I would like to make a comment on, if you allow me, is the issue of building blocks. You know, a continent is huge. So if individual countries take initiatives and try to domesticate some of the trade policies that have been put across from the continental level, and the coordinators of the AFRI-CAN to work closely with the government, even when they're doing their budget at the individual levels, they will be able to put in place resources that will train the youth and the upcoming entrepreneurs to be able to take up businesses within the continent. So those are the key areas I'd like to comment on in terms of trying to move this forward together with other people.
So thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Broadbay, Dr. Makuku, Professor Yosin, Mr. Alabi. Thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. It has been great. We will do this again. I'm sure this is not the last time that we are going to meet. We will do it again. Yes. And my co-moderator, Kwesi, thank you for joining us. I'm sure you can hear us, your few words, and then we can take our pictures.
All right. Thank you very much. So I've been joining you from the Eastern Premier Hotel based in Koforidua in Ghana. And we also want to say special thanks to our facilitators for the job done, and to our distinguished participants who joined us on Zoom and also on our social media platforms, bringing in their comments, questions, and contributions. But I think we just dropped one. He's saying that here from the Shared Value Africa Initiative, we are busy working with PASI on an information app to fill the information gap, especially for our young entrepreneurs on the. That is a great job. Thank you so much, Bernard, for what you are doing to support AFTA. So on this note, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and we wish to meet you in September for the third quarter. My name is Kwesi Sam, and I'm the president for AIE Network. Thanks to the technical crew and to the entire team for the great production. See you in September.